Yo, what's up everybody? It's your main man Wingdrops, and I'm here with my very first deck profile. So, what we have here is my Granblue deck. I named it Chugging the World, and with it, I placed in the top 150 players at CharaExpo 2019. The Bushiroad Championship Series for the standard format in Cardfight Vanguard. So the meta over there, as you know, at that particular point of time, was the top decks were all Excel clans, or most of them. So like the best decks at the time were Pale Moon, Murakumo, Narukami, and Shadow Paladin. Shadow Paladin's Force, but those are like the top clans at the time. So you would think that Granblue as a Protect clan wouldn't do as well, but I managed to hold my own at the event, and I went 4-2 overall after 6 rounds. I actually didn't know that 3 wins was the cutoff. I thought 2 was, so after I got 2 losses, I stopped playing and started playing Vanguard Bingo instead. So theoretically, I could have went 7-2 and made top 8 that way, but that wasn't what happened. I managed to get 4 wins though, so I'm pretty sure, I'm not 100% sure, but I'll just say this is probably the number 1 deck, or the number 1 Granblue deck at the event that day. If I wasn't, I'm sorry, but I'm pretty sure I was, because I didn't see many other Granblue players, especially for standard. So let's get into the deck profile. The number 1 and blue deck. Okay, we will start with, these are my extras. My imaginary gifts, I guess. Here's the special edition that came with your registration. I ran Protect 1s. I do have Protect 2s in here, but I actually never use these, so these don't really count. I use Imaginary Gift Protect 1s because they give me a free Perfect Guard. Imaginary Gift Protect 2 is pretty poor in the Granblue deck because while it does give more intercepts, more guard power for intercepts, your units will usually in the front row die at the end of each turn. They retire themselves, so they won't even have a chance to intercept. You'll see that later. So I have those protects right here. Then we have, so the first card is our starting Vanguard, Captain Nightkid. Pretty standard starting Vanguard, the Forerunner. When you ride upon him, you draw a card. All I'm saying is if you run Guiding Zombie, I don't know what to say, dude, to you. You're inting yourself. Captain Nightkid is superior in every single way. Why would you run Guiding Zombie? Captain Nightkid is the OG. So, Captain Nightkid is a must. This is a staple. Then we'll run it down with our grade 0s. So here's my trigger lineup. I run 12 crits. We got 4 Rough Seas Banshees, 4 Night Spirits, 4 Mortal Mimics, and we run 4 heals, 4 Rick the Ghosties. Now, many of you probably already know, but the reason why I don't run draw triggers in this deck is because Granblue has an issue with decking out. The main Vanguard of this clan is called Cocytus. His skill requires you to mill the top 4 cards of your deck. And the whole mechanic of the deck, that your entire engine relies on milling your deck. Like some effects will only activate if you have 10 cards or more in the drop zone. Some activate if you have 20 or more in the drop zone. So you mill really fast through your deck. So we want to minimize decking out power, I guess, by not running draw triggers. If you run draw triggers, you have a higher chance of decking out early in the game. And not running draw triggers actually came in clutch for me in this tournament because there were 2 games in the tournament, one against Narukami and one against Murakumo, where I literally only had, after all was said and done, only had 1 card left in my deck before I finished off my opponent. So you do not want to run draw triggers in your deck because it hastens the decking out process. So and I run 12 crits because that's the main option. There are no fronts in this clan because it's not an Excel clan. And 4 heals, pretty self-explanatory. For my grade 1s, I run 4 Dandy Guy Romario. Dandy Guy Romario is the, I guess, ideal first ride that you want for your first turn because of his on-ride effect. His on-ride effect allows you to soul charge a card from your hand and then counterblast 1, and then you mill the top 3 cards of your deck, choose 1 card from your drop zone and add it to your hand. So it's a toolboxing card, and the soul charging effect can come in handy too. So basically Cocytus' effect lets you revive cards from your drop zone equal to 2 plus the number of grade 3s in your soul. So oftentimes, if I have an extra grade 3 in my hand, I'll use Dandy Guy's effect to soul charge a grade 3 prematurely, so that when I do ride Cocytus, I will already have grade 3 in my soul, which will increase his reviving power. So that's just a way to accelerate your game. And then the toolboxing effect is very helpful. So first of all, milling 3 helps you accrue cards in your drop zone for all of your drop zone effects that require certain amounts of cards in a drop zone. He's one of them, by the way. If you have 10 or more, he gets 4,000 power, which makes him my preferred booster in the late game. And second, just the milling lets you get cards in your drop zone. You get to see what they are, and then you can add a specific one into your hand depending on your situation. Like if you're grade stuck, you can look for a grade 2 or a grade 3, etc. You can, like, if you need a certain card, you can just add to your hand. So this is the ideal first ride, and I think it's essential to run 4 of him because he's very important. He's so versatile. He's the best booster. He lets you toolbox, and the soul charging effect can come in very handy. After Dandy Guy, we are running 4 Dolph The Ghosties. So if you remember earlier, I said we didn't run any draw triggers. So for your perfect guards, you have to run them in your grade 1s. And I run Dolph The Ghostie here. He's the new kind where when you place him on the Vanguard circle, you draw a card and discard a card from your hand. So he's actually the second best ride in the deck. It's very rare that your opponent will abuse the 7k power. So yeah, it's a good ride. Sometimes though, if you go second, you have to call someone behind Dolph to hit their grade 1 Vanguard. That's the main weakness, but his ride effect is pretty good. It lets you draw a card and then discard from your hand. So you can discard something strategic like Ghost Dragon, who I'll go over later. So I run 4 of these. Then we run 3 Ripple Banshees. A lot of people I know run 4, but I prefer to run 3. Ripple Banshee is really good because her effect is when revived from the drop zone, you Soul Blast 1 and then draw a card, and it gets 4,000 power. So remember, since we didn't run draw triggers, this is one of the ways we can draw on our deck. And you still, even though you deck out really fast, you still want draw power in your deck to keep up with the other decks in the meta. Because some of the other ones, they attack hard and fast. You want a lot of cards in your hand. And there's another card that you want to have a lot of cards in your hand for, which I'll bring up later. But yeah, so run 3 Ripple Banshees. Pretty good for draw power. Then I run 1 Troubadour Cadaver Alfio. Shout out to Josh, aka OTH Samasu, for convincing me to run this card. This card will come in clutch in certain situations. It actually came in clutch for me at this very tournament. I was up against a Narukami player, and he tried to cheese me by not attacking me and leaving me with no counterblast remaining because Cocytus' main skill requires a counterblast. But what Alfio does is, when placed from hand, if you have 10 or more cards in your drop zone, you discard a card from your hand, and then you can countercharge and soul charge. So if someone's trying to cheese you by leaving you without any counterblast, like ending their turn so you don't have any counterblasts available, you can play him from hand and then countercharge one and be able to use Cocytus' effect again, or any counterblast effect for that matter. But I highly suggest running one of him. Running two is kind of overkill, so I'd only run one. Because it is very easy for you to fish him out with either Dandy Guy Romario or Greed Shade, who we'll go over later. But yeah, very, very essential for those certain situations where opponents try to cheese you and not attack you so you don't have any counterblasts. I actually won the game that turn against an Arakami player using this card. I wouldn't have won without him. And then last but not least is my personal tech. Not a lot of people will run this card, but I do. His name's Evil Shade, also known as Mr. Miller. That's the old nickname I used to give him back in high school, in the old Vanguard. But what he does is you counterblast one, bind a card from your drop zone, and call a card of the same name from your drop zone to rear guard. So basically, there will be certain situations where you're running out of cards in your deck, and you can't afford to use Cocytus' effect anymore. And that's where this guy comes in. Very, very situational, but if you need a quick revive and don't have the cards in deck, you can call him, counterblast one, and then revive something from your drop zone, like Skull Dragon or something. So I run one of Mr. Miller. He just it's just an alternative way to revive things from your deck. Later on, I'll show you guys, I don't run Basskirk. Usually people will run Basskirk as a grade 3. As a backup Vanguard to Cocytus in the situation that you're decking out. But I prefer not to run Basskirk and run alternatives like Mr. Miller. So in total, we have, I believe that should be 13 grade 1s. Let's see, 4, 8, 11, 12, 13. Yes, I run 13 grade 1s. For grade 2s, we have 4 Greed Shade, aka Miller Lite. That's what me and my friends call him. He's basically the grade 2 version of Dandy Guy Romario, but more consistent, I guess. He's really good in that he's a toolboxer, and he gets 5k if there's 10 or more cards in your drop zone. So in the mid game, he's probably someone you want on the field because he's a decent 14k attacker, and he lets you toolbox. His toolbox effect is when placed, discard a card from your hand, mill the top 2 cards of your deck to the drop zone, and then take 1 card from your drop zone, not including him, and add it to your hand. So you can, first of all, you can superior mill from your hand, which can come in handy when you want a specific card into your drop zone, like Ripple Banshee, the one that revives and draws a card, or Skull Dragon, the grade 3. Then you mill 2, which adds to your drop zone count for the 10 or more effects, and then you can fish 1, toolbox 1 card from your drop zone back to your hand. Very, very, very useful. A lot of times what I'll do is, since the meta was Excels, I would use this effect to fish out either a heal trigger or a crit trigger so I could guard more attacks. Or I would get a Dandy Guy Romario for a booster. But yeah, he's really good. And you can also fish out a grade 3 or grade stuff. But he's really, really good. You have to run 4. If there's 4 ofs in the deck that are like essential, even if you're on a budget, you must have 4 of Greed Shade, 4 Dandy Guy, and 4 Cocytus. Otherwise, the deck won't be that good, in my opinion. So you need 4 Miller Lights. Then we're running 3 Captain Nightmist. I think this card's kind of underrated. Basically, he's a counterblast 1, revive a card from your drop zone. He's the utter get out of jail free card for when you're decking out. So the first one was Mr. Miller, aka Evil Shade. Then we got Captain Nightmist. He's a decent mid-game card too if you want to just revive something from the drop zone normally. But when it's getting into late game and you're running out of cards in your deck, you can call Captain Nightmist from your hand, counterblast 1, and bring out a Skull Dragon, and without having to mill 4 from your deck with Cocytus. So that's why I run 3 of this guy. Then we have 2 Stormride Ghostships. Stormride Ghostship is your mid-game option for reviving from the drop zone and hitting hard. He's also the other draw power in his deck, aside from Ripple Banshee. So its effect is, cannot be called from your hand. It can be written though, which is key. And when it attacks, it gets 1500 power, or 15,000 power. And at the end of the battle, it attacks, it retires, and you get a draw card. So in the mid game, you'll revive him from your drop zone. He becomes a 24k attacker, which is actually pretty strong. And then he dies, and you get a draw card. Really good mid game power. And you get a draw from it, which is important. But in the late game, he just gets outscaled by Skull Dragon, which is why I only run 2 of him. I would even consider running only 1 of him, but I find 2 to be more consistent. Any more than 2, and it's overkill, because in the late game, you won't be using him at all. But he's really, really good. Ideal. You want to use him in the mid game, so I run 2 of him. And then to round out my grade 2 lineup is a nostalgic card, Ruin Shade, aka Miss Miller, which is my nickname for her. Literally, the only reason I use her is to expedite the milling process. So what she does is, when she attacks the Vanguard, mill 2, plus 4k power, plus 8k if you have 10 or more in her drop zone. I'm only in it for the milling of 2 cards. I basically never use her as a rear guard past my grade 2 ride, because she just gets outclassed. Her power bonus is weaker than Greed Shades. Unless you have 10 or more, then it's stronger. But at that point, you probably have enough cards in your drop zone, and you don't need her mill 2 effect again. She's also weaker than Stormride Ghostship straight up and Skull Dragon. So I run 2 of her. If I need the faster mills, I'll call her out and mill 2. Finally, the moment you've all been waiting for, the grade 3 lineup. We need 4 Cocytus. Cocytus is your main man in your deck. I've mentioned his effect already, but it's Counterblast 1, mill 4, and then revive 2 cards from your drop zone, plus any grade 3s in your soul. So if, let's say you had 1 grade 3 in your soul, you would revive 3 instead. So he's really, really strong. The milling helps you reach the 10 card or 20 card in drop zone threshold, and the reviving, he's the main reviver in your deck. He's how you get cards from your drop zones out into the field, so you need 4 of him. His passive effect is also very strong. If you have 10 cards in your drop zone or more, he gains 10,000 power. If you have 20 or more, he gets 20,000 instead, and a critical. So he will be a big threat once you have 20 or more in your drop zone. He'll be hitting for, if boosted by Dandy Guy, he'll be hitting for 44 with a critical. And it often forces your opponent to perfect guard this attack because it has a built-in crit, which is problematic for them because if you have 2 Skull Dragons on the side, they'll likely be even more power than the Cocytus. So being able to force their perfect guard is really strong, just because he has a built-in crit. So you need 4 Cocytus. He's the main engine of the deck. You get a mill of him, you get a revive of him, and he gets crit and power and stuff. The next grade 3, also essential, is Dragon Undead Skull Dragon, aka Cool Guy, which is a nickname me and my friends use for him. He cannot be called from hand, but he can be ridden. So the main way you use him is you have him in your drop zone and you call him from drop zone using Cocytus' effect. And his effect is he gains 2,000 power for every card in your drop zone. So in the mid to late game, you'll often have upwards to 20, 30 cards in your drop zone, which let's say you have 25 cards in your drop zone. He gains 50,000 power, being 62,000 power just by himself. If you have a Dandy Guy behind him, that's 74,000 power. He's a real beefy boy. And if you're up against, like, let's say Excel decks, they likely don't have the resources to guard such a beefy attack. So in the end game, what you want is a Cocytus in the middle, uses effect, call out 2 Skull Dragons, have a 44k attack and 2 like 70k attacks, and you run at him that way. I run 3 of him. You can run 4, but I'm a little bit greedy and I only run 3. mainly because we have so many milling effects that it's pretty easy to get at least one of them in the drop zone. But there have been games, like against the Narukami player, for example, where I straight up didn't have any Skull Dragons in the drop zone. If that happens, I guess you'll lose. Except I did win that game, actually. It was just crazy. But yeah, if you don't get these in a drop zone, it sucks. But once they're in your drop zone, call him out. He'll be a really, really strong attacker. You can run 2, but with 2, you run the risk of damage checking 1. Actually, 2 is stupid. Don't run 2. Run at least 3. 4 is okay too. And then my last grade 3 is Violence Flanger. Like my main man says, 2 Violence Flangers is a must. I used to run only 1, but now I run 2 because he's so good. He's your finisher card, and if you remember me saying earlier you want a lot of cards in your hand, it's for this card. Basically, if you set it up correctly, you can make it so that his attack is unguardable except for by intercepts. His ability is, you Soul Blast a grade 3, discard any number of cards from your hand, and it gets 5,000 until the end of the turn. And for his attack, your opponent cannot guard with Sentinels, aka Perfect Guards, as well as cards from their hand equal to the grade of the cards that you discarded. So say you discard a grade 0, a grade 1, and a grade 2 from your hand. Your opponent can no longer guard with any grade 0s, 1s, or 2s from their hand and Perfect Guards. Basically leading up to an unguardable attack. The caveat is they can intercept, but a lot of times this card will be too strong for their intercept anyway. So he's your finisher. When they're at 5 damage, I'm always looking to call this card from the drop zone, discarding the 0, 1, and 2 from my hand, and making it so they literally can't guard his attack, and they have to hope either to heal or lose. I actually won 2 games out of my 4 wins at CharaExpo with his final effect. One of them was a Narukami player. I didn't get any Skull Dragons that game, but I managed to finish him with Flanger. Flanger is a must. He's, I used to run only 1, but sometimes I would damage check him and Flanger would just straight up not be available. You can easily fish him out using, what's his name, Greedshade, or you can straight up revive him with Cocytus if he's in your drop zone. So yeah, and a lot of times my play would be with Cocytus to revive, I would revive Flanger, and if I didn't have the resources in hand, I would also revive a Miller Lite, aka Greedshade, and use Greedshade's toolboxing effect to get the 0s, 1s, or 2s into my hand to force them to not be able to guard. And that's basically my deck. We have 9 grade 3s, 4 Cocytus, 3 Skull Dragon, 2 Violence Flanger, and I think it's pretty standard, my build. The only thing that's slightly controversial would be running Evil Shade, I think. And maybe running Alfio. Where's Alfio? Alfio and Miss Miller, and also 3 of Captain Nightmist. But other than that, I think my deck is pretty standard. With this deck, I was able to win 4 games at CharaExpo and become the #1 ranked standard Granblue player in California at that specific event. Actually, I don't know, because people from all over the world played. I did play a guy from Atlanta, Georgia, which was pretty interesting. But yeah, this is my Granblue deck profile. It was able to stand toe-to-toe with the strongest decks at CharaExpo. And yeah, that's basically it. Thanks for watching, guys. It's been your main man, Wing Drops, and we're done here.
Like the video if you like it, dislike if you dislike it, leave a comment, especially if you think all this is bullshit. And as always, don't forget to subscribe. This video is sponsored by
11 Hearts.
11 Hearts. Build a beautiful.
By the way, we're not in the car.
Bide your time and hold out hope.